Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Talking Talent podcast, the Talent and People Professional podcast. I'm your host, Ben. With me is always my glamorous assistant, Dale. How are you?
Oh, I'm not too bad, thank you, mate. How are yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. We've got a bit of a meaty subject this week. It's something that is quite close to our chest at the moment. Obviously, at the time of recording, we're both looking for new roles. Unfortunately, our contracts were ended. It's been tough, isn't it? It's a very tough market at the moment. I don't know what your experience is so far with it. Quite quiet. Anything? A bit of movement?
Unfortunately, no movement for me. It's tough because there's so many good people in our world that have in the same situation have found themselves unemployed through no fault of their own, and it just means that it's just a really tight market. I think a lot of businesses are not wanting to hire as much. They're certainly cutting back teams, so you've got a lot of very good people all applying for a smaller number of jobs, and so it's always going to make it tough. And obviously I've recognised not the only person in the situation, but it's certainly it's tough because I'm the type of person as well. I don't know what to do with myself most days. I'm really. I just feel like I have no purpose. I love doing talent acquisition. I love what I do. I've always loved what I do. So it's kind of like a whole chunk of me has just been taken out a little bit. I know it sounds really like cringy and a bit.
No, I get it. It's that structure, isn't it? And of your kind of day-to-day routine as well. I do feel a bit lost. I remember the other day I sat there, I genuinely, hand on heart, did not know what day of the week it was. I got up at sort of 6:30, 7 o'clock. Maisie obviously woke me up, as you can imagine. Just sat downstairs, stuck the telly on, and I genuinely had no idea what was going on, really. But I want to talk about candidate experience this week on this week's episode from both sides. As a candidate, from our side, I think obviously we've got quite a lot of experience on that at the moment, but also from an employer perspective as well. So in terms of where we want to start, I think the big topic is the communication piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we start with that, why is it so difficult? And let's put your TA hat on for a sec. Why is it so difficult to please candidates in terms of the communication?
I think certain people, everyone's going to have different scenarios. I think right now if you're unemployed and you are really searching to find a role, and you're really especially trying to stay within your own career path, you are going to be expecting things a bit quicker, because you just, again, like you said, sometimes you forget what day of the week it is because you've lost that structure and you want to get back to it. So I think in some cases, differing expectations maybe factor into it, but I think there's a lot of genuine gripes, and I like to think that the vast majority of people in talent acquisition, internal recruitment, resourcing, whatever we want to call it, whatever it's called in different places, the intention is not to not communicate, and I 100% get it. If you don't get a response, you're not told. But I think some of the issue stems around rejection at application stage. And I see a lot of people talk about, well, you're not providing me any feedback. And from completely a TA side, I've had roles where I've had hundreds, many times I've had hundreds of applicants. And obviously when I was in the rail industry as well, we were trying to, you've got courses you have to get people set on. There's certain numbers you have to get for certain locations. Right. So you have to work ahead because you've got assessments that you have to do for them to get. Same with train drivers. Again, that takes a very, very long time to go through the process. There's a lot involved in that process. So you do sometimes have to allow yourself, just because odds and percentages. I've had hundreds of applicants. Let's say 500 applicants, and I've got it down, and I've only got 10 people who've actually passed the assessment stage through all of that. So sometimes you do have to let it, because I'm just jumping in before, you get people that will say, well, don't let it get to hundreds, like close it early. And it's like, sometimes you can't, like sometimes you have to because of the odds and
a fair process as well sometimes. Especially
Yeah.
from a sort of public sector side of things, you have to give deadlines for things like that, so people are aware of that. It's a candidate expectation as well. And I think from that side, I get it, but I am kind of a fan of that now. I never used to be, but I am sort of a bit of a fan. Obviously, you need to manage the expectations, and obviously the role, obviously seniority level. If it's more junior entry level roles, of course you naturally attract more candidates. But I think just being a little bit more kind of just clear and transparent about it.
yeah,
Even if you
setting the
put the disclosure at the
expectations.
bottom, we reserve the right to close the role early. Absolutely, then. So it encourages
Yeah.
candidates to get their applications in sooner rather than later instead of dawdling on it.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because sometimes you're not going to be able to give feedback to people, and I accept that. Somehow I feel like I've had more rejection emails than I've actually applied for jobs. I don't know how that makes sense, but certainly feels that way.
They're the ones I've been sending you. Sorry, I apologise.
Just only the 2 so far this morning, thankfully. So it's not too bad, but. And I do accept that because I've been on that side of it. That is what we do, and we understand. No one's got time. You've got hundreds of people. You've probably got, and there are some places where you're managing 50, 60, 70 vacancies at any given time. You just can't give that individualized feedback. And I always say, if someone reaches out to me, like they emailed me and wanted feedback, I would. Because if that's one person, obviously it says you don't want to set that.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. If you're doing that, surely then that entire process is not fair. Then, just because they've had that proactive approach to message you, that's not fair on the other 89.
Reward proactive thinking. I mean, maybe that's just me being nice sometimes, but I feel like if someone reaches out, I can go in and find them. But
to throw a caveat, then, if say you're getting 100 applications, you're rejecting 90 of them, and 85 of those 90 email you asking for feedback. That's then not feasible, is it?
Well, it depends.
So where do we draw a line in terms of what's acceptable feedback? No, but if hypothetically, if they do, then you still got that problem of time constraints because, cutbacks in the team, etc., etc. You don't have enough hours in the day to manage 50, 60 vacancies with 100 applications on each vacancy.
No, and I think but sometimes you've got to marry up because obviously you've always got... The difference is if it's going through to the standardised inbox or it's being a complaint, someone's making a complaint, you know what it's like. You're going to have people...
Of course, that's different.
Go and do it. So sometimes you're trying to mitigate, those risks. And sometimes I'm like, it depends on the timing. I'll try and find some time to see if I can do it. It depends how good your ATS is as well, how much it retains that information, how quickly it is for you to go and find that person. Let's be honest, the vast majority of people won't chase it up, at that stage. But and it's really quite tough. Like you said, if you had that amount of people, it's just never going to be feasible to do it. And although it's frustrating because people want to know where they went wrong. And sometimes you didn't go wrong. You don't know who you're up against. I've had roles.
This is very true. Yeah.
We're literally looking at it going, oh Christ, there's 25 people that hit, all these criteria. They're really great, but the manager only wants to interview 5 people. So, it's 5 people selected out of it, and it's like. Sometimes you've got to kind of marry it up. And, I've had conversations in the past where they're like, well, someone's complained, this happened. You've got to show them how they didn't meet all the criteria. And it's like, well, actually, they did meet all the criteria, for example, but they just weren't in that top 5. And that sometimes is the reality. And I don't think some people realise that sometimes you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes it can literally be the hiring manager decided that they were, rightly or wrongly, they decided that their metric was based on years of experience then in doing that. Because everyone's met all the other criteria and they just decide, well, I'm just going to decide on best. I don't always agree with years' experience.
No, but it's something tangible. It's evidence then to explain to a candidate that's only got 3 years' experience, somebody's got 10. Then I do, from a personal standpoint, I understand that. That makes sense to me. Especially if you have got 20 people. But from
there's nothing you can do about that. You can't change your experience level.
Of course you can't. That's why you're applying for the job.
Be helpful.
Yeah, exactly. But if I've got my sort of candidate hat on, my job seeker hat on, I mean, I've applied for jobs that I know that I'm hitting 9 out of 10 of those criteria. I've had a rejection literally the next day, and I'm thinking, why? I know I fit the criteria. I know I hit the criteria. I'm ticking all the boxes. I've got the experience. I've worked for their direct competitor, for example, and it's a case of I know that industry. I know the sector inside out. I've got 10 years experience, whatever it may be. Why? And it's when you're a candidate, you're a job seeker. You don't then think about the other side of it. Obviously, where we're in TA, we can see it from both sides and appreciate the viewpoints from both sides more. But if you're a candidate completely not in that sector, it's so tough to understand that.
And I think that's it. I think this is where it's tough for us to have this, looking at it now, because we're actually on both sides of the fence, and you can see it is frustrating, and it's really disheartening. It's soul destroying sometimes, because you're like, there's only so much I can tweak my CV. I've got like 5 or 6 different CVs, at the moment, to kind of put out there, and there's a lot of conflicting information around what you put on a CV. Some people say you got to do this, some people you got to do that. If I put my TA hat on, I go, CVs are becoming overcomplicated. Yeah. For me, I just want you to have a clear CV. If I'm reviewing your CV, and that's why it's tough, because I've got to kind of sometimes try and get in the mind of individuals, and then you just drive yourself insane. For me, it's make it clear. Yeah. The only advice I could ever give to anyone is make it clear. Show me who you are. Show me what you've done. And I want to know, have you done these things?
Anything that's on your job advert or job description, however you're advertising, correlate that on your CV. If they're matching, great. Because obviously there is. I know we'll talk about AI on a different episode, because that's quite a meaty subject as well. But there's AI tools and stuff which pass your CV. They will go through everything and literally just correlate it. If it's word matching, it's a tick. You're on to the next one. And when you are applying for roles where they have got so many applications, people are harnessing AI more now. So it's a case of sometimes your CV may be fantastic and your experience may be fantastic, but you've not conveyed that in correlation to that specific job advert.
No, but I mean, that's when the frustration comes, is when people know they have done it and they've got it all in there. They've taken the time to write a personalised cover letter for these roles, and you're still not getting past. And then you start to like wonder what is going on. So from a candidate standpoint, 100%, it's really, really frustrating. But you also know on the TA side, I think the difference is with us, if we're experiencing bad candidate experience, we're experiencing it from the people that should be championing good candidate experience. We're being let down by people who are running the talent acquisition department, because they're the hiring manager or the head of or whoever it is, depending on
of course.
The role is. So I think we could get a bit more frustrated perhaps about poor candidate experience, but I do think we've got a little bit more of an understanding of what it takes on the other side. So we have a bit more understanding and a bit more, I guess, empathy with the TA team. If, we don't know how big or small they are. We don't know what their current
just about to say that.
Is.
Exactly.
And we've been on that other side of it. I've been on the other side of, having, people leave and not have them get replaced, and everyone's having to, increase their workload, and it gets tougher and tougher. I think you've probably been there with the 60 hour work weeks, just to try and
absolutely
stuff, log in on the weekend, not take time off. That happens.
But the thing is, if you're looking after your staff, you don't mind doing that now and then.
Nah.
And the communications there of this isn't going to be forever. It's going to be the next couple of weeks until we replace that person that's left. You don't mind absorbing that workload because you're doing it for the greater good, The
one thing I say, though, and I think it is inexcusable, and I have experienced it myself very recently, is you've actually had a conversation. with the people in that company.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not talking a recruitment agency. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
We'll move on to that later as well.
Recruitment
Yes,
agencies,
very much so.
But when you've actually spoken to someone in the business, and then you get ghosted.
Yeah,
even if it's just an initial conversation, even if it's just a quick 20, 30 minutes Teams call, and you're told, yeah, we'll be in touch about a second interview or whatever else, and then you don't get that response. I think that, to me, there are no excuses for those things, and I've always said we have to give people the time of day because they've given you their time. We're not talking about applications. There's a load of caveats to why it's not feasible to give everyone feedback at that stage, but
just a basic email, just a basic communication. Say, thanks for your time. Unfortunately, we've gone with another candidate, or
just let me
going
know.
a different direction. Yeah, that's the thing. That's all I expect from with a candidate hat on for a sec. That is the minimum I expect. Yes, it's annoying. It's frustrating if you think you're really good for it. And as you mentioned, Alec, of course, you can email, you can chase up, and hopefully they get back to you. But if you are, with our TA hat on, if you're applying for a role, you've spoken to someone, they've given their half hour of their time on, WhatsApp video, Teams, just a telephone call, maybe face to face. As you said, they've given up their time to speak to you, and likewise, you've given up your time to speak to them. Make it worthwhile. Build those relationships because you genuinely never know what life may lead. Especially if you're like the rail industry. I'm sure it's a limited pool. People will move about. They'll go to competitors and things like that as well, depending on the areas they live in, of course. But it's a small world. So you may reject them and then move to, wherever, C2C, for example. And then that same person might already be there. And they could be a manager and they'll go, I don't like Darryl. He mugged me off last time, just ignored me. And all of a sudden you've got a really difficult fractured relationship going in, with from a TA perspective. But also on the flip side of things, so I feel like I'm waffling here, but there is a point. But I know I've been in positions where I genuinely have forgotten about candidates because my workload is so much and I'm speaking to so many candidates. But I do the caveat of, say it's Tuesday. I'll get back to you before the end of the week. If I've not got back to you by Monday, please drop me a message, email me, or drop me a text or a WhatsApp. Maybe easier depending on if you've got work phones and stuff. But I religiously say that to every candidate I speak to because it is a prompt. I'll be completely open with them and say, look, I'm speaking to a lot of candidates, not just about this role, but lots of others, as you can imagine. Please feel free to just give me a polite nudge. That's all it is. And I'm more than happy with that. And I feel like just saying that one sort of line keeps that relationship so much fresher and more open.
And also it just closes it down anyway, just for the person. We're trying to, you're trying to make sure it's just more of like just respect. I think that's fundamentally what it is. If someone's taken time to have a conversation, and it's even worse. I've heard of horror stories of people going through 3-4 stages of interviews, which I think is excessive anyway. But that's a whole other conversation to be had.
Yeah.
But they've gone through all of that, and then nothing. And I think that to me is kind of ghost, and you get it, and I know there's always this caveat, and I see it a lot as well as candidates ghost as well. It's like,
of course they do, absolutely.
It doesn't make it right.
No, you can't. It's not a tit for tat. We should be priding ourselves on our reputation because it's all about network. It's all about your reputation in TA as well as your employer branding. It's about your own branding. It's about your own offering as an individual talent. Talent partner, talent acquisition partner, whatever you want to be. You're a professional. Just do the basics right. It frustrates me somewhat, and I appreciate, there will be occasions where you can't always do it, and absolutely, but just hold your hands up to it. So I'm really sorry I didn't get back to you. Yeah, unfortunately, it is a no. These are the reasons, but please you get in touch. That's all you need. We're all humans. We understand that everyone makes mistakes and you're going to forget things. But just be open and take ownership of things. It's not that difficult.
No, exactly. And I know sometimes it is hard because sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes hiring managers, you might not get the feedback from them, or you're chasing really hard to get it. We've all been there, and sometimes the feedback is quite frankly rubbish, and you just but you've got to find a way to at least give some closure. And I'm not advocating for lying to candidates, but sometimes you've just got to at least get to them. And I sometimes say, there's been plenty of times I've given calls and said, look, unfortunately, on this occasion, they're not going forward with you. The role has been offered to someone else who has accepted. But I am chasing for feedback for you, and I will endeavour to get this feedback for you as soon as I possibly can. And that's because you close that, and then you make sure you let them know that they can reach out to you, and that's fine. They can reach out,
sure,
because you want to close it off. Especially, I don't know if you've been there as well, where it's only gone internal, so know full well that you've got a finite number of hours before this becomes a bit more public knowledge.
Absolutely, yeah,
and it becomes a problem, and that's on us. We got to try and get managers to see it. Sometimes it's not always possible. You can coach hiring managers about best practice until you're blue in the face. It's not everyone is going to adhere to it, but at least let them know. Give them that little bit of closure and feedback in there, and it just kind of closes it off a bit nicer, because you can't just choose to ignore because you're like, oh well, I don't have the information yet. It's like no, you've got to give something back to them.
It's common courtesy, isn't it? It really is common courtesy. It's like if you were in a supermarket and you ask for someone, oh, have you got any of these out the back? Like, yeah, no problem, I'll go check. If they've looked and gone, oh, I can't find any, but I'll ask someone. They may be new, for example. They'll ask someone. And then you see them 5 minutes later down a different aisle stocking something on the shelf. You're like, well, what's going on? Oh, well, I've asked my colleague. Yeah, but tell me. I've spoken to you. I don't care about Mr. X or Mrs. Y. I've spoken to you. You need to tell me. It's like it's just common courtesy. It's basic human interaction, is it not?
Yeah,
it's
agree.
insane. It's insane.
Yeah, but I mean, look, that's not the only thing I think about candidate experience. I think it's really good to also look at the process, and I think we're getting an insight into how many different processes happen. And I did say something probably a bit controversial here.
Oh.
I quite like you asking me questions in an application. I would prefer to fill out an application and you ask me something that's specific to this role. You want to know about my certain experience, or you want to know something about me, a character trait, for example. And you ask those questions, and I can then take the time to do that. Do you know what I don't like? Quick apply.
Yeah, because
you're
a number.
Yeah. And you know that then you're in the market with everything else. I think you've got to merge it, and I've always tried to be quite clear with this, on the other side as well, is to say, look, you don't want to overcomplicate it, and you don't want it to take too much time, but you want it to take enough time that, the people applying actually want this job.
Yeah, it goes to that quality over quantity, doesn't it? You always want a good number of applications. So you've got a good broad spectrum to be able to judge, your potential talent joining the business. But equally, you don't want 100 applications, 150 applications, because it's so difficult to go through. But I mean, things like a cover letter, it takes a little bit of time. Personally, I'm not a fan of them.
I'm not a fan.
For some roles I am, but generally speaking, I'm not a fan of them.
No, and I think sometimes they can be a bit waffly, a bit, there's no kind of hard and fast rule on what a cover letter really should be. We all have our own ideas on what it is. But I quite like, I do quite like an app. As long as the application questions, there's not too many, and they make sense to the role. If you're going for a talent acquisition manager or a head of talent acquisition, and the question is, please tell me about a time that you led on talent acquisition strategy, that makes sense to it.
Of course it does. Not what's your favourite animal. I hate those sort of ones. Yeah, tell me, if you were an animal, what would you be?
Yeah, the stupid generic ones. Tell me about a challenging situation. How did you resolve it? Yeah. It's like, I don't like those. But like I said, to go through that, I go, right, I know what you're asking me. here's the answer. This is very clear. Let's go through it. And I think they're fine. I think where we need to make situations, things better is repetition of information. We should cut out of application processes. People shouldn't be, and I think things are getting better. And again, I think this is where technology is probably getting a little bit better. The AI and passing, kind of taking the information from a CV, and that's great. It kind of it fills out a lot of time, and I think that's great to put that in there. And I think
it's a good experience, isn't it, for as a candidate as well as a recruiter?
Yeah, and so you want to make it there, but I think you want to make it clear and transparent for a candidate, so they know what's expected of them. They know what they need to do, and they know things like deadlines, and they know what's coming up in the next process. I think what's really needs to be put out there more is what's the expectation on interviews. I know you like maybe jumping ahead, but I don't know about you, but if I know that from the start that they want to have 5 different interviews with 5 different people, I'm probably not going to apply for that job, because I'm thinking, who's the decision maker in this scenario? Do you know what you want?
Exactly.
That's 5 different cooks in a kitchen, and
and it could be completely legitimate. It could be the reporting line. It could be because they're the guys that you collaborate with. From TA, you collaborate with marketing, with comms if they're different departments, with your people team, your L&D team, onboarding team if you've got an onboarding team, then your operations side. So I do get it. You potentially could have all of these people, so you'd have that, but maybe condense them down into 3-stage interview and combine 2 of them into one, 2 of them in the other. But part of that, it's setting those expectations, and it's great. And as you said, if it puts you off, then that's probably good for them. So no one's been having their time wasted. But it's same as adverts. It all links together, doesn't it? You're writing. Your tone of voice first and foremost is absolutely important, because that gives any candidate an idea of what the culture's like, what your company's actually all about. But 2, the expectations of what the job's actually entailing, like what are the responsibilities, what are your duties, who are you collaborating with, just basic stuff. Doesn't need to be an exhaustive list, but that also helps candidates when they're applying. If you've got to do a cover letter or there's application questions, you've got something to revert back to, and that's then what you're gauging and what you're scoring as a TA.
Yeah, and I think, I think be open and honest, and, I've had the experience recently of, and again, this comes into the realm of there's all many different reasons to why recruitment agencies don't put out the actual advert on their own feeds. I'm not going to get into all of that. That's their own decisions to make in that side of things. But, when you look at it, you go, okay, so I've applied to a job because this is what has been stated. And then you have a conversation with a recruiter, and then you get sent the actual job description or the actual advert, and then there's discrepancies, and you're going,
totally
I don't
different.
Actually, I shouldn't be having to say to a recruiter that I don't actually meet these essential criteria.
Is this an agency? Sorry, you mean? Honestly,
won't name them.
No, we don't want to be like that. We don't want to slander people in our profession, because agencies can be fantastic. They're an extension. You and I both see it exactly the same.
Great people in agency side.
They're fantastic, and they should be partners. They're an extension of your TA team your internal TA team. But what winds me up is when you are a job seeker, lots of random agencies add you on LinkedIn or contact you, and it's great. You have really nice conversations. You think, oh, he or she's really nice. Love that. It's a great conversation. Hopefully they'll be able to help me get a job. And they give you this, not false hope, because it could be, absolutely legitimate. Then they ignore you for 2 months, and you get another job, and all of a sudden they're your best friend. Oh, hey, Dale, congratulations. Oh, it'd be great if we could meet for a coffee, a chance to work together. Now, I'm sorry. Anyone that does that to me, if you're out and out saying it from the start, saying, wherever you get a new job, it'd be great if we can work together. Hats off to you. I'll absolutely entertain it, because you're being honest. You're being open with me, saying, I haven't got anything, but I do recruit in that area. So if you do get anything, whatever. But if you've ghosted me and you've ignored me, I'm sorry. Like I saw a post yesterday on LinkedIn. It's quite a long one. And this woman clearly had a really terrible time job searching. And luckily she's secured a new role. She starts in a couple of weeks, which is fantastic. But she had the same experience. She had so many agencies get in touch and then ghost her. Why? And companies do exactly the same as obviously what you've experienced. why would you work for them? You'd never partner with that company again, because you're at a low point, you're desperate for work, you need to secure your income, you've got a family to support, mortgage payments, etc. You're at your low point. If people aren't there at your worst, they don't deserve you at your best. It's basic principles, isn't it? So why would you partner? Because that's your culture. Your culture is, I don't care about you because you don't benefit me at this moment in time. Now, to me, I just can't work like that. That's terrible.
No, and I think what happens is it's all about, and I think this is kind of where I see UK business mindset at the moment, is everything is about that short term. Never thinking about long term. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go in because I need to hit my targets this week or whatever else. We've both been on that side of the fence, so we know KPIs and targets exist, and sometimes they don't make any sense at all logically.
No,
but, and I understand that, but you've got to look a bit further ahead. You've got to think about bigger picture. Oh, that person, because at the end of the day, we are talent acquisition professionals, so. You're going to have an opportunity, we're going to get jobs, and then you're going to have an opportunity to try and link up. If you've been open and honest and you've actually tried and hats off, yes, I will entertain those ideas. If you've been just trying to get in there with a sneaky one, like I've had it with some where they tried to reach out to me. Now, bearing in mind, I've got open to work on my profile. I've been posting that I'm looking for a new job, and a recruiter come out to me and go, I just want to see, if I could help you out with any hiring into your business.
It's lazy, isn't it?
And
just go away.
By the way, they are a HR recruiter, and it's happened to me. This is about 3 times this month, right?
It's terrible, isn't it?
And they're HR recruiters, so they recruit in our space. They hire people into our roles. And I say to them, I go, oh, I appreciate you reaching out. Unfortunately, I tell them, unfortunately was let go, and I don't actually have a company, so I can't actually help you out right now. But sorry, I couldn't be of assistance this time. Not because I don't know. I don't want to just be like, hey, like, can you help me though, like, kind of thing. Because I don't know how to narrow. Sometimes you just don't.
No, I think every conversation is an opportunity. Now, I don't like the hard sell.
Yeah, but for me, it's a little bit of a test as well, though, right? Because I'm saying
see if they offer.
But so they want to hire into my team. But then all of a sudden, when I'm like, oh look, so I know they recruit these roles.
Okay, I see what you mean now. Yes.
But then they're after, oh, I'm sorry to hear about that. Let me know if you need any help at any future businesses. So that they only wanted me purely to see if they can hire into my team.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong, I get it. There's not a lot of roles out there at the moment, so they're just trying to get that. And there's probably a lot of candidates out there, and they're probably like, oh, well, I need roles rather than candidates.
They're doing their job as well. I fully appreciate that, but it's the human element, isn't it? Every time it's that clear communication. It's all an experience, whether you're a candidate or a partner. It's all about that experience.
Yeah, but I mean, look, let's not get into agency. That could be a whole other kind of conversation. But I was going to say, for anyone who wants a good read on candidate experience, it's probably going to show backwards.
No, you're all good. Well, I think it is anyway.
But yeah, candidate experience, how to improve talent acquisition to drive business performance, written by Kevin W. Grossman and Adela Schulderman. Hopefully I haven't butchered that one. But no, it's a really, really good book to read about, the different areas of candidate experience. Obviously, there's a lot of research to help back up. We always love a bit of research to back things up. It's always a really good read if anyone wants to have a look on there. Obviously, if you're a member of the CIPD, obviously you get your discount on Kogan Page, who are one of the publishers. And I've always found it a really good read. Sometimes I go back into it to have refreshed the mind on certain things, but I think it's good to kind of look at candidate experience in many different factors. It's not about the communication at a certain stage or feeding back when people are unsuccessful. It's about everything from how you advertise a job. Are you being transparent? Are you being clear on what the job is? Are you you're not putting too many, must-haves on there, because again, these people don't exist. And I know it's a fight with hiring managers all the time about these unicorns and whatever else, but you know me from working alongside me. I've always said to hiring managers, especially more recent, is tell me what your absolute, you cannot have anyone without these things. And then you actually find out you're actually down to about 4 or 5 actual things rather than 12. But you make it clear so someone can engage it. And again, a lot of people will be searching on their phones now as well. So you can't be having massive long JDs that they're fluffed out with pointless information. But you want to make it clear exactly what is expected. So when they're doing an application, they know what they're applying for. So you've got that in there. You need to make sure the application process is streamlined. It's not clunky. God, please, people, stop using Workday. Well, I have to cut that bit out.
So that's this podcast episode is sponsored by Workday, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
But, it's not always bad, but like sometimes it can be. But there are plenty of bad ATS out there. But sometimes it's how you also, it's not always the ATS. It's how you set up the ATS. And again, it's the talent acquisition teams to have more of a knowledge about what is good, what isn't good. And there are certain things you always have to hit along the line. But one of the things I always say as well is transparency in the process. Let them know if you're in an industry where things do take a little bit longer. They did in the railway. Unfortunately, it's one of those things. A lot of roles need to be assessed. There was always a lot of roles going on. You had to find time to get people in for assessments. I didn't always have time to do them as quickly as I'd want to do them because again, you've got to marry up your different workloads and here and there. And
it happens. That's the thing. Yeah. Things happen. We know that.
Medical processes as well. And sometimes a medical process, they're very stringent. So
they're the worst parts generally, aren't they? They're the ones that take the longest.
And sometimes you want someone to... a GP report. Now, if it goes to a GP report, sometimes it can take even longer. So sometimes some of the processes have ended up being, 2 months between someone getting an offer and whatever else, and it can happen. But if you're transparent at the start and you let someone know, look, this is when the advert is expected to close. This is when you should expect to hear from people. This is when we're expected to shortlist. This is when we're expecting if you're doing assessments. This is when we're putting things aside. And again, that's just you should have been doing that planning to start with anyway. So put that information in there, and it actually gives everyone a deadline. The hiring manager and yourself.
Exactly.
You know what the deadlines are. But everyone knows what's expected in there. And actually, to be honest, that type of thing as well will likely mean that you've got less people to screen. Again, the same as like making the application process work, not making it too quick and easy for someone to put in there, but, making it so that it's obvious to someone, this is what we're looking for. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but I've got to an application process, I've looked at JD and gone, I hit all of that. That's great. I'm going through it. And it starts to ask me questions and I go, oh, no, I don't meet that criteria if you're asking that question for that.
It's not on the JD at all, this.
Yeah.
Where's this come from?
But then I'll go, fine, I can't answer that question, or my answer to that question is no. So therefore, I'm not going to carry on with that application process. Yeah. So, you got all of that and you go in there and then you go, everything else should work throughout the whole process. The shortlisting, the communication back to them. If they come for an assessment, things should be clear. They should be, welcome. They should be given the opportunity. Interviews, we should make sure that hiring managers know how to interview. I know it sounds like such a silly thing, but you get hiring managers that go, yeah, well, I've been doing recruitment for 10 years. No, you've been a hiring manager for 10 years. And let's be honest, you might not know that you've been doing it right or wrong.
Exactly. You've been left, you have that assumed trust and assumed ability to do that. Whereas, and it's not saying that they can't do it. It's just, you're the experts, as a talent partner, you're the expert in the interview techniques and things like that as well. It's just a bit of teaching. It's not saying that you're rubbish. It's just to upskill you, to make you feel confident and in your ability to source who's going to be the best fit for your team. It's not to say that you're rubbish at it. It's just trying to utilise that skill set to get the best candidate to join the organisation.
And things change, as I said, again, another really good book is Neurodiversity at Work by Theo Smith and Amanda Kirby. And, you're looking at that and saying, okay, now we have more of an understanding over, neurodiverse conditions. So we understand more about people with autism, people with, dyslexia, dyspraxia. So actually, no, we're getting with the times. We understand more. So let's try and make sure that our interview processes are a bit more, actually just removing barriers. We remove barriers for those people. And I think that's key as well. That's a great candidate experience. And and helping people through that process. That they need support, we need to be offering support. Again, great candidate experience, because these people probably been discriminated against more times than we could ever count. But it doesn't stop there. Even if they get the job offer, the candidate experience still carries through that whole onboarding process. And if you ask me, the onboarding process is the most key part of a candidate journey, because
very much so.
You've already decided that this person is good enough for that job. And absolutely losing a candidate at that point, who you know is already great, is such a killer, because you've wasted weeks going through everything. You wasted other people's time. You've wasted money.
I was going to say, money's the big thing for an organisation, isn't it?
So, again, that has to be right, and it has to feel through, and it has to go all the way up to them starting, but also in their initial weeks. They need to be onboarded right, and they're still a candidate in that period of time, because that's still their first interaction being inside the business, that it has to carry on for all of that. And I think what we've seen is still people say they want to do candidate experience, they want to focus on candidate experience, but they're missing out chunks of it, or things they're not thinking about certain parts of it. And it's like, well, if you're not thinking of the whole picture and improving the whole life cycle, then you're not prioritizing candidate experience.
No,
and I think
absolutely.
It's key, because people talk, and especially certain industries.
Reputation blows up so quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we're not just talking. People are very. We see it on LinkedIn now, and we see it on other areas. People are very open now to speak about bad experiences, and businesses that do not prioritize candidate experience and do not, prioritize the employee experience, they will find out the hard way. When markets are back, because let's be honest, we go back and forth. When eventually markets go back into being a candidate-led market, then those employers are going to find out the hard way that reputation and employer branding is absolutely vital. And the candidate experience being bad is one of the biggest destroyers to your employer branding. Just period. You've got to get it right. Otherwise, you'll lose the best talent, but you'll also mess yourself up for the future. So I think it's key to look at it, and it's not something you can fix overnight, and it's not something you can make perfect. There will always be slip-ups. There's a lot of things that said that are out of your control. Your ATS plays up, and you think something was sent and it wasn't. Hiring managers just being hiring managers sometimes. Yeah,
perfection is impossible, but you got to aim for it and aim as close as you can get to it. I think that's probably the best way to kind of see it and end on that, really, to be honest with you. So yeah,
I agree,
guys. Thank you for listening / watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. If there's any topics you want to discuss or want us to discuss, obviously drop us a comment below, and hopefully we'll get around to recording and talk about it then. But for now, thanks for listening. Speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.